Hello, my name is Ian McEwan, and you're listening to New York and Company with Leonard Lopate on WNYC, AM 820, New York Public Radio.
For those of us who follow a Gregorian calendar, and that's most of the people on the planet, a major milestone is on its way. As much as there's been speculation about how the coming of the millennium will change things, so far it seems like the biggest problem is how computers are going to figure out what to do with all those zeros. Unless, of course, you're a fan of Ira Levin's. Then you might think twice about what the next few years will bring. Remember that little baby who was born back in 1966? The one who, because of his unusual heritage, had a black bassinet with an inverted crucifix for a crib toy? Well, he's all grown up now and just in time for the big event. Whatever happened to Rosemary's Baby? Well, the answer is here in Ira Levin's new novel, Son of Rosemary, just out from Dutton. I'm both thrilled and a bit terrified that it brings Ira Levin to New York and Company today. Hello.
Hi.
Terrified because, like the first one, this is a very scary book. It plays right into all of our darkest fears and desires.
That was my intention.
Is that one of the secrets of writing a book like this, to make it the sort of thing that we want on some level to happen?
No, I think it's more to bring out the things we fear might happen.
But why do you think Satan has so much appeal?
I don't know. I think partly because I've helped give him a lot of publicity. You know, Rosemary's Baby led to The Exorcist and The Omen and a whole string of pop culture depictions of Satan, which I think have made him more believed in today than he might otherwise have been.
And you told an interviewer you feel a bit guilty about that.
Yeah, and it was a factor that kept me from working on the book, even though the idea appealed to me tremendously once I realized that, as you said, come 1999, he's 33 years old.
And you had not realized that when you were writing the book?
I did not. I had no sequel in mind. In fact, believe it or not, I didn't realize that he was born in 666 when I was writing the book. I wasn't aware of the significance of the number until after I finished the book. I put it specifically in that date only because I wanted to tie it into the time when I was writing it, because I felt I was dealing with such an unrealistic story that I had to anchor it in reality as much as I did. So first finding that he was born in 666 was a serendipitous surprise. And then when I realized that meant he would be 33 in 1999, I felt, well, it was meant to be. I have to do something.
33 also being the age of Jesus
Christ,
when he
He
died.
was crucified, right. So obviously that's going to be a significant age for the Antichrist.
Well, you said that when you wrote Rosemary's Baby, you thought that it would make people more skeptical of religious myths, and that by making it into a thriller, it would lose some of its power somehow. Instead, the opposite happened.
I thought that by dealing with Satan that way, that it would sort of lighten things up. But as I say, it didn't.
It struck a chord.
Right, the success of the film in particular led to all these other works. And
well, I'm not even going to tell people about the basic plot of Rosemary's Baby. I assume that people
good.
know it. People know it either from having read the book or seeing the movie or doing both. In this story, Andy has...
I thought you weren't going to give away too much about Son of Rosemary.
No, well, we have to talk a bit about it.
Well, he is grown up. And
he's seen as a Messiah.
He's seen as a Messiah. But actually, the story is told from Rosemary's viewpoint. When at the end of Rosemary's Baby, she resolved that she was going to bring him up in a loving way and counteract his dark side. And I've assumed that she had 6 years to do that and then got zapped with a major spell cast upon her.
So she's been in the equivalent of a coma.
So when she comes out of the coma in 1999, and he is this world figure, supposedly benevolent, whom everybody loves, she doesn't know whether she really shaped him up in those first 6 years or whether he's his father's son. So she is in an ambiguous situation, and presumably the reader is too.
DNA. The D doesn't stand for devil, does it?
No, I don't think.
You seem to really like puzzles. In Rosemary's Baby, there's the anagram that she figures out from Scrabble pieces. Stephen Castevet equals Adrian Mercado. And you have a similar thing in this book. Rosemary is given another anagram to figure out.
Right. I like the idea of keeping her interest in Scrabble and anagrams, and it worked out very well for one of the minor characters who also had to have an interest in puzzles and wordplay. So I worked in an anagram that had baffled me for a long time before I found the solution. It's a tricky one, and I worked it into the book.
And do you play with anagrams normally, or do you think that it's something that's necessary for this kind of book?
No, I play with them normally. I played anagrams when I was a kid, and then Scrabble, and I've always done crossword puzzles. So,
Well, in a way, this sort of thing grounds a fantasy plot, doesn't it?
it does. I think so. At least I hope so.
But you like these puzzles. In The Boys from Brazil, the whole plot is like a puzzle, with Mengel's elaborate plan to recreate Hitler's boyhood experience. Do these puzzles occur to you first?
No, I'll start thinking of a theme and somehow find a way to shape it into a puzzle. I think one of my earliest influences were the classical mystery stories of the 30s, particularly John Dixon Carr and Ellery Queen, where there was always some kind of tricky interpretation of something that you weren't looking at in quite the right way. So I like to create that kind of situation.
My guest is Ira Levin, who has written a sequel to Rosemary's Baby called Son of Rosemary. It is published by Dutton, and you're listening to New York and Company on AM 820 WNYC Radio New York. I read that you've been thinking about writing this sequel for a while, but that it was Alan Ladd Jr. who encouraged you finally to do it.
Yes, as I say, I was accumulating notes on it and picking it up and putting it down because I had this genuine feeling of guilt about having increased the overall level of belief in supernatural. But he came to me and said, write a sequel, write it your way, no input from us whatsoever. And then there would be a movie over which I would have significant creative control.
Now, what does that mean? Because in the past, you have not written screenplay adaptations of your
I've
novels.
never gotten involved with the film versions. I've always felt it's better to go on with something else and then spend several years doing nothing. So I thought, well, this time they seem to have been genuinely influenced by Michael Crichton, and to recognize that a novelist can make a significant contribution to a movie.
Well, you've written screenplays.
No, I've never written a screenplay.
Oh, just theater. Well, you've written a fair number of plays.
I've written for theater and novels.
Is it all that different, writing for theater and writing for movies? I would imagine that movies are some kind of merging of the novel and
the big difference is that in the theater, the playwright has absolute control. A word can't be changed without his permission. Mm-hmm. Whereas in movies, it's totally the reverse. And I've never wanted to go into that situation, but I've been assured that this would be a situation where I would have creative control. I would do the screenplay. I would have approval of the casting and the director. And so, but meanwhile, things are sort of bogged down, and it hasn't quite come to pass because Paramount, under the original Rosemary's Baby contract, has dibs on the movie rights. So it's gotten a little sticky, but hopefully things will work out.
Your play Death Trap is Broadway's longest-running mystery play of all time, and that was made into a movie as well. In fact, the movie didn't hurt the run of the play.
Oh, yes, it did. The play closed a few weeks after the movie opened. And I've always had the feeling if we had held off longer on letting them release the movie, that the play could have run a lot longer. Because the role lends itself to interesting casting. You can always find a good actor who will go into it for 6 months or however.
You could have beaten out Cats and...
Absolutely. It could be Death Trap now and forever.
Yeah, but there's Mousetrap in England.
Well, there hasn't been a successful thriller since.
You had a lot of fun with that plot, too. It's kind of like a play within a play. You wrote a classic thriller while at the same time you wrote an insider's poke at the genre.
Right.
That was fun for you as well?
Yes.
Revealing
yes.
how the whole thing is done? How much, well, the main character is Sidney Bruhl. He describes his protege's play as highly commercial. It's so commercial, in fact, that he's willing to kill off the young man and claim it as his own. Now, I'm not suggesting that you're like Sidney Bruhl in that regard, but you definitely wouldn't kill somebody for a good story. But how much do you think about the commercial appeal of something that you write?
How much do I?
About the commercial appeal. Does it have to be something you think that'll be a bestseller or a hit play?
No, the first consideration is whether I'm enjoying it, whether it's fun for me. And then I always assume that anything that works for me is going to work for an audience. Mm-hmm. It isn't always the case, but I really don't think, is this commercial or is this not commercial?
Some critics have seen all sorts of people as influences: Ambrose Bierce, Edgar Allan Poe, H.G. Wells, Aldous Huxley, at least This Perfect
read
Day.
all of them.
But I also see movies, especially Hitchcock, as an influence, even though you don't write the screenplays. You seem to be influenced by the best suspense movies.
Well, I certainly saw them all growing up, and I am a great Hitchcock fan. In fact, I was very disappointed early on when A Kiss Before Dying came out. There was a chance of his directing it, and he passed on it because if you're familiar with the book, a large part of it would have to be done with a subjective camera where you don't see the character's face, and he felt that it couldn't sustain for a third of the movie. And I think he was right. But,
who did it finally?
It was directed by Gerd Oswald, who was sort of a good minor director. And I've gotten fonder of it over the years. Originally, I had reservations about it.
Well, does it bother you that many of your books are better known, perhaps, for the movie versions than by what you wrote? Because they're so plot-driven, I think.
It is, particularly when I feel that the movie hasn't done the book justice, as in the case, say, of Sliver or The Stepford Wives, neither of which I was really happy with.
You had to be happy with Rosemary's Baby. Roman Polanski seems to be the perfect match.
I think not only that, but I think it's one of the most faithful adaptations ever made. Almost every line of dialogue in it comes right from the book. And even the colors of the costumes, which sometimes I choose for the word rather than the color, he used that color.
You've dedicated this book to Mia Farrow because she was the perfect Rosemary?
Because she really fulfilled the character for me. And over the years, when I think of Rosemary, I think of Mia Farrow. And
have you talked to her about doing the film version if it ever gets made?
Yeah, I showed her the first part of the book when I finished it, and then, of course, the finished book. And, she likes it very much. And what's not to like? It's a great role.
You grew up in New York, but you didn't grow up in the Dakota, did you?
No, I didn't. Not far away, though.
I was thinking of Boys from Brazil. If Rosemary's Baby is a perfect adaptation, how about a movie that stars Gregory Peck and Laurence Olivier?
I was pleased about that.
And then Death Trap, we have a great cast as well.
Yeah, Christopher Reeve and Michael Caine. Except I can't say I've really written for them because they're not speaking that much of my dialogue, but it's nice to have created roles that attracted such good actors.
But you don't think in those terms when you're writing. Do you have faces in mind when you write characters?
When you've sold a lot of books and plays to movies, you tend to sort of think somewhere along the way, you begin to see certain people and think, well, this would be a great role for, like in this case, I thought, well, Brad Pitt was born to play the son of Rosemary.
So
he's got that devilish thing in his eye.
So you wrote it thinking of Mia Farrow today and Brad Pitt.
Well, and don't they look like
casting.
mother and son? She's a young mother, but in the book she is indeed supposed to be, at least in her head.
She looks much younger than she is. She's amazing.
Oh, we'd have to age her up in the beginning.
Because she was here not so long ago, and I was amazed at how unlined her face is after all those babies. Yeah. Most of your early success came from writing for the theater. You did an adaptation of No Time for Sergeants back in 1955. There was a hit comedy in 1960 called Critics' Choice. Why not any comic novels?
First of all, I haven't had a really good idea for one. If I had, I would have pursued it. but I've mentioned the possibility to editors over the years. They say, no, stay with suspense, stay with horror.
Because in the public's mind now, Ira Levin means
I
something.
think in the theater you can switch genres more easily, but with books there seems to be an expectation that you're going to do something at least similar.
Do you feel trapped in writing Gothic melodramas and mysteries?
No, because they're what I enjoy. And as I say, if I had a good idea for a comic novel, I would pursue it in an instant.
Without giving away the end of this book, suffice it to say it's shocking, and some might even say risky for a writer to end a book the way that you do here. Can you talk about why you chose to finish the novel that way?
I wanted to give it a kind of ironic edge, and again, I don't want to spoil the ending, but that was the only way I could see to do it. And I said, in fact, with my first conversation with Alan Ladd, I said, well, look, if I write this book, it's going to have an edge to it, and it may not be exactly what you expect. Mm-hmm. And he said, makes no difference, do it your way. Mm-hmm. Of course, probably thinking in the back of his head, well, this is Hollywood, we can always change it.
And they have, haven't they?
Well,
they could give this book a happy ending if they want.
Yes, right. They certainly changed Sliver around a lot.
Does that bother you?
In the case of Sliver, it does, because I really feel that it was a good novel, well-written and suspenseful and well put together, and the movie just didn't make sense.
Well, your novels, your plays, I'm sure, are your babies, Ira Levin's babies, right? And then you see somebody else take this child and make it into something that is unrecognizable to you, but your name still appears on the credits. Adapted from the novel and they use the same title.
It's definitely mixed feelings. Even Rosemary's Baby, the first time I saw it, all I saw were the few moments that aren't faithful to the book. Mm-hmm. And I had to see it a couple of times before I appreciated how faithful it is.
That's why a lot of people feel that the writers shouldn't do the movie adaptations because they get so involved with remaining faithful and sticking all their favorite things.
From a director's viewpoint, it is good to get a fresh take, and sometimes it's very helpful. I have to admit, even though I have reservations about The Separate Wives, I think Bill Goldman, who did the screenplay, came up with an idea at the end that I kicked myself for not having thought of myself, for not having her go back into that house where the men are doing their dirty work. I don't know why it didn't cross my mind, but so it can help a lot to have a fresh viewpoint.
But that film just didn't come alive in other ways.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope that this film does, because it's really scary. Mm-hmm. It's called Son of Rosemary. Right now you can read it in its novel form. It's published by Dutton.
And we can all use our imaginations, which
That's
are
right.
better than Hollywood.
But remember, Brad Pitt and Mia Farrow.
Right. And see if you can spot Elizabeth Taylor's cameo. I put one in for her.
Ira Levin's other books, his other novels, A Kiss Before Dying, Rosemary's Baby, The Perfect Day, The Stepford Wives, The Boys from Brazil, and Sliver have all been international sellers, and almost all of them were made into movies as well. Son of Rosemary is the latest. It's from Dutton. Thank you so much.
Thank you.